This will probably be the last episode that focuses on the interior refresh of my 240SX. On the last episode, I finally got those forged carbon fiber seats in the car. I also got my flocked dash in and a brand new grip rail steering wheel. There's a few parts that I skipped over a little bit towards the end that I want to show you how it all went together. These heel plates, they go in the floor pan of the car, and I had them powder coated texture black. Came out looking really nice. I also put some rock lights under the kick panels. They're the same type of light I used for my dome light. These are actually meant to go in the wheel well of an off-road truck to show off the suspension or the back of the wheels. I wired those up to the same wire harness that I made for the dome light, so that's all connected off of the door switch, and they turn on and off as you get in and out of the car. I also put these carbon fiber roll bar protectors in. I know it's a shame they don't come in forged carbon so that they could match the seats, but they're pretty cool, and they also cover up some of the spots that I messed up on the paint. It's a cool little addition to the car that makes it look kind of flashy. I haven't done the passenger side yet, so I'll show you how this all works really quick. Pretty much just a carbon fiber tube that they cut in half and sell you for $80. I'm gonna take the tape off of these. They've been drying for a few days. I haven't really touched the car for a little while, kind of took a break from it. The idea is you use silicone on these so that they stick just enough, but not a permanent solution, because you want to be able to remove them and replace them if they get damaged. So you definitely don't want to epoxy these onto your roll cage and then be grinding them off a year from now because they got damaged. So these are close to being the perfect length to just slide in there and glue them. They're only a few inches too long. I just cut mine straight across. Some people like to round the edges, and I probably would have done that if the edge was a lot more visible. But since the front edge is all the way down at the bottom of the floor and the back edge is being covered by the B-pillar, it kind of seemed pointless to me to spend a lot of time. And I don't mind the straight edges either. I'm making dime-sized dots about every 8 to 12 inches. That should be plenty to hold it. This is really the last big part for the interior going in. I'm sure everyone's seen a hydraulic handbrake. And if you're like me, you probably took out your mechanical parking brake when you installed a hydraulic handbrake. And come to find out, it's kind of a pain in the ass to park your car sometimes. When you're on a hill, all you can do is put it in gear, which is great, except for if the car's running, you can't do that. So then you have no brake. I've got a little trick that Formula D driver Matt Field told me about. He uses these valves to create a line lock on the handbrake so you can effectively have a temporary parking brake on the handbrake when you need to get out of the car for a moment. For whatever reason, brake fluid leaked out of the lines on this, and I'm not 100% sure why. I assume that I should have put some Teflon tape on this fitting, but I know these AN fittings shouldn't have any tape on them. I'll at least do it on this one for sure, but hopefully it doesn't leak anymore, because it ruined the paint that was on the trans tunnel, and now that I've freshly painted the car, I don't want that to happen again. I spent quite a while trying to figure out exactly where I wanted this valve placed, and I pretty much assumed it was going to be somewhere on the transmission tunnel. Luckily, you can take this handle off, and that allows you to configure it in quite a few different directions, and you can also take this stop off and move that around, which allows me to 180 this thing so that the handle will actually turn a different direction. What I'm gonna do is have the handle so that when the valve is open, it's gonna be facing towards the front of the car. I'll put the screw back in here really quick. There we go. And then when I close the valve, it's gonna pull back. Hopefully that'll be noticeable when you sit in the car. You'll see that and think, oh, the parking brake's on, and then not forget to take it off. It'll be pretty obvious when the car doesn't budge. I think that I'm gonna be able to attach it to the handbrake bracket now that I look at it. I think is gonna be a pretty clutch way to do it, because I can just drill 2 or 3 holes through that bracket and attach some screws on these threads that already exist. Is a nice simple way. I need to get the brake line that goes to the back wheels found, because right now it's under the car dangling somewhere next to the driveline, and push it through. So originally the fluid would come out of this line from the master cylinder of the car, and it would go to this back fitting, then obviously travel through the master cylinder for the brake and leave this fitting, which is where we're gonna put the valve, and then it will come out and attach to this line, which is what used to be here. It's probably gonna be a little bit of a pain that this line has a right angle fitting on it. It would be better if it was straight, but I think I can kind of fish it in there somehow. Some people would just cut it off and put a straight one on, but I'm not sure if I'm comfortable cutting in line for a brake and pressing that back on there. All right, this thing is on here. Looks like it just barely clears the top of those Allen heads, so Not too bad there. And I'll have to do a little test fit to see if it fits in the car, but should be all clear to go and hook this thing up. Everything's back in and all tightened up with the hydraulic handbrake, and I need to bleed the brakes now because lost a ton of fluid when I took that whole thing apart. I'm gonna use a one-person brake bleeder, which is really cool. This is effectively, I don't even know what to call this, a gallon of air. You pump it up till it's at 15 or 20 PSI, and it forces the brake fluid through the system without having to pump the brake pedal. So there's basically like 15 pounds of pressure in that little tank right now. I'm gonna crack the nipple and it'll just push all the brake fluid through. All right, it was getting pretty late last night, but I managed to get the brakes bled. I did a horrible job because I forgot that you should pump the pedal a few times and pull the handbrake to push more of the air bubbles out of the system. Since I think the system got so depleted of brake fluid, it's gonna take me a couple tries to get it fully bled properly, but it seems like there is something there, so I wanted to pull it out of the garage now that it's daytime and test this parking brake on the driveway real quick to make sure that it's all squared away, so let's give it a shot. Oh my gosh, it's actually sunny for once, I can't believe it. But anyways, the parking brake is working. I put my foot down, pulled the brake, and I took it out of gear, and I'm just sitting here in the car on my slightly slanted driveway. So that's really nice to see. I would definitely never rely on this as a sole solution to leave your car parked somewhere because hydraulic stuff does fail. It's the same reason my lift has a steel lockout that puts a chunk of steel in between each post so that if those hydraulic lines fail, the thing's not going anywhere. These lines can leak, and as soon as you start losing pressure, the car is gonna start rolling down the hill. So if you're planning on doing that, keep a chalk with you in the car, but this will at least allow you to put the brake on and get out of the car for a little bit. You know, do a once over if you need to. But yeah, I'm actually gonna pull the Quattro in the garage and give it a little once over right now because I'm gonna take it on a little drive tomorrow. So let's see what's up with the Quattro. This thing's been getting flooded, it seems like. Ever since I've owned the car, it's always been hard to start. It's just something I've dealt with. I've replaced quite a few things trying to sort it out, but the engine's just gonna end up getting a whole overhaul eventually. I forgot how much I love having this car in the garage. It's way cooler than the 240. This suspension has so much droop. It's a little more obvious because I'm not running helper springs, so the spring kind of goes loose once you get it a certain height, but you gotta really jack it pretty high up there to get the wheel to spin. I'm pretty sure I already see the problem here. There's a gigantic crown nut that attaches to the outer body of the whole strut assembly, and that keeps the shock inside that strut assembly so that when you replace a shock, you can unscrew that and pull the old shock out, pop the new one in. It looks like this one's loose. When I took the old suspension out of the car, I had an incredibly difficult time getting that crown nut off. I ended up having to cut it off with an angle grinder. So I was a little bit conservative, I think, when I put the new stuff all back together, making sure that I didn't over tighten it. Obviously it wasn't tight enough. So I think what was happening with that is since it was loose, there was a void where the shock was moving up and down inside this outer housing. And that was making the popping. I mean, anytime you've got a 4,000 pound vehicle and two pieces of metal hitting together, it's gonna make a pretty loud pop. I put a little over 5,000 miles on my Quattro last year, and some people said that wasn't that impressive, but I think it's pretty good considering I spent the first 3 months of the year completely restoring the suspension and the wheels and brakes and the interior. So I got kind of a slow start. This year, I'm gonna try to do 10,000 miles. So my plan is to go on probably 6 road trips. Some of them are gonna be a couple thousand miles long, and the first one is gonna be tomorrow, and I'm gonna drive to Cape Flattery. You've probably never heard of Cape Flattery. It's the furthest western point in the continental US that you can drive. It's basically way up at the tippy top of Washington, and it's only about 400 miles away from where I live. I already grabbed a bunch of snacks and put them in a cooler, and I've got my toilet paper, just in case I need to blow my nose. But I wanted to film the whole thing on my red Komodo, so I've got a suction cup mount that should be able to support it and a panel light to fill in my face because the top of my window has this tint on it that obviously is unremovable, and it makes the top of my face dark. I absolutely love shooting stuff on my Reds, but shooting on the Komodo is gonna add a huge level of complexity. I normally shoot all these videos on my Pocket 3 because it's so easy and versatile and it looks good, but the Komodo is much, much heavier. It eats up a lot more batteries. It doesn't have nearly as good of autofocus. So it's definitely gonna be a lot more difficult and a lot more time consuming is what I'm mostly worried about. I've only got probably like 8 hours of light, and I think it's about a 6 or 7 hour drive. So I'm probably gonna leave in the morning before it gets light out and just really haul ass up there so I can stop and film some stuff on the way. You can kind of get an idea of what the camera is going to look like here. I have it in vertical mode because I've been shooting some Instagram reels on it lately, but tomorrow I'll have it in horizontal mode, just, like YouTube. I'm actually not going to have the monitor on it either, and I'm going to have a much smaller battery to hopefully save myself some weight. And in order to see what the screen sees, I'm going to be using my iPad here with the Red app, which isn't too bad of an app, but it's a bit laggy. And on this 10-year-old iPad mini, it almost doesn't even work. You can see this thing has some kind of facial recognition autofocus, but it only seems like it works if it's plugged into the app, and even then it doesn't work that great, and it takes forever, that's for sure. But I think it'll be good enough. The car is pretty much ready for the most part, so I'm gonna pull the 240 back in here and maybe wrench on it a little bit longer before I call it a night. We're really on the final stretch here at the interior, and these are the last couple parts. I've got the center console. It was already clearanced for the hydraulic handbrake, so I don't really have to mess with that, and it's not fouling the parking brake, so you can kind of just plop it back in there. I did a 3D printed cup holder, which is really nice, whenever you've got your coffee or whatever, and a USB-C charger that is made for a Toyota, but it just so happens to fit almost perfectly in this hole. I'm gonna have to clearance it just a tiny bit, but I also did a rock light that attaches to the back of this, and it lights up the whole rear of the car, which I think is a nice touch. And then these climate delete panels, which are made by LRB Speed, same company that makes the delete panels in the rear. Just going to wrap these purple like the rest of it and put that back in. The climate control actually doesn't go on this like it used to when the car was stock. It goes inside my cup holder. And I did this a few years ago. I didn't do an amazing job. The plastic is super brittle on this, and it was already pretty broken up, but it fits right inside of this thing like this. And it's pretty cool because even though it's not a really clean setup, you don't ever see it. This is always closed, and you kind of just open it, once in a while to turn the blower motor on, turn the heat on or something, because this car doesn't have AC. You're not really using any type of climate control for the most part, unless you're trying to heat the thing up in the morning when it's cold. But for the most part, yeah, I think it's a pretty clean look, and I'm excited to get this all wrapped up. This has a voltage readout, which I'm not too sure about. I think it's kind of cool because I don't have any other voltage gauges in the entire car, so it might be kind of nice to see what it's up to once in a while. It's just blue, which is not my favorite. I don't know why these brands always make this stuff blue, but whatever. So I can put the center console back in there now and get the climate control plugged in, and then I can just do the delete panels and we'll be done. This little surround thing needed some more clearancing. For whatever reason, the whole entire assembly seems like it's in a different place than it was before. Part of the handbrake is hitting it. I got it looking good. It's kind of nice and rounded off so that it looks like somebody did that to begin with. I'm gonna wrap these with vinyl and kind of clean up this wiring that goes to these 3 gauges that are in my climate control panel so that no one's ever gonna see it, but it'll just look nice. And if I ever take it apart again, it won't be a humongous mess. So get that sorted out, and I'm gonna be pretty much done here. I've got the radio back in, and it's not functioning now. I just wanted to cover up this gigantic void that's in this panel here so that it wouldn't just, look like nothing's there. I'm eventually gonna get a nicer stereo and do a legit stereo install with maybe like some under seat mounted subs if there's room. Get that all figured out. I got the shifter bezel back on and looking really good with this titanium hardware. I picked black because I wanted something really nice, and I thought about going flashy with gold or something, but it's just too much for the direction this car is going right now. So kept it nice and simple with these Torx bits. And then the shifter is still the same shifter I had, but I got this little lower piece on it that holds the shift boot up and keeps it nice and tidy looking. This is very OEM plus looking. I really love it. So that's really cool. It's just like a little $10 Amazon thing. Next for the car is gonna be the trunk. I'm gonna tear everything out of it, the air ride, the wiring for the taillights, the battery, of course, all that stuff. Get it painted really nice. It's still gonna be white just like this, so I get to take another crack at painting, see if I can improve a little bit on my skills. And just gonna reroute some of the air ride lines, try to make them look a little bit more organized, maybe do hard lines or something that might be cool, but wrap the tank purple so it matches all the other aluminum bits in the interior, and then gonna do a really nice clean up on the wire harness so that it matches all the other wiring stuff I've done in here that looks so much better than when it was all torn apart mess like it is now. Should look pretty cool in the end. I think that's it for the car this week. Next week, I'll be driving the Quattro to Cape Flattery, so that's about 700 something mile round trip. Hopefully that thing holds together. There's a couple little bits I'm maybe worried about. The alternator's not in great shape, and I'm trying to think what else. The car just doesn't start that well sometimes, so I don't know, little things I can fix on the road, but I'm sure should be fine. So the week after that, we'll be back on the 240, and yeah, we'll get started on that trunk. Check your polarizer.